Welcome to the Aaron Harber Show. My special guest, Peter Isely. Peter, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
So you are a founding member of SNAP, the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, as well as the co-founder of Ending Clergy Abuse. Tell me about each of those organizations, what their missions are.
Well, the Survivors Network, that started 26 years ago. And that's based in the United States, although it's been around the world too. And there's like 20,000 victims of sexual assault and rape by clerics in the Catholic Church in the United States that have been part of our organization. Ending Clergy Abuse is a global organization. So that was launched in Geneva about a year ago. And so that's survivor leaders and activists and human rights activists from around the world. And because this is a global issue, it's now been finally really determined that this is a global system of abuse and cover-up, that system in some essential way originates in the Vatican with the laws and practices in the system of the Vatican, this abusive system that's underneath the system that a lot of us might see and know or what appears to us, and that there's only going to be a solution to this problem when it's a global solution that is directed at the Vatican and the man who's in charge of that nation state, by the way, sovereign state to us, which is, of course, Pope Francis.
So talk a little bit about, I think, the revelations, especially in recent years, about the Vatican's involvement. I think in the past, a lot of people, the public, looked at the Vatican as an entity that was either missing the picture or not responding appropriately. But what's really come out is a much darker story.
Yeah, no, I should also say what's most important about me as well is that I'm a survivor. I was sexually assaulted as a boy by a priest in Wisconsin, and that's really the reason why I'm sitting here. The people who have known everything about this and who know the most about this is the Vatican. I mean, what's so hard for people to take in, if there's an organization that knows more about global pedophilia on this planet, that has hundreds of thousands of pages of documents about it, detailing the rape and sexual assault of children around the globe, it's the Vatican and the Roman Catholic Church. And Pope Francis has that knowledge and all that information available to him. They have at least acknowledged 5,000 cases. Now, there's a lot more. We can talk about the frequency of this and what's going on, but that they have at the Vatican, because they are under a standing order, every bishop and cardinal around the world, that when they become aware and have determined that a priest has committed these crimes, that information that they have gathered, which, by the way, that's criminal evidence, where do you think it goes? In fact, the bishops just met in Baltimore. They had a disastrous meeting 6 months ago. They came back and said, okay, we're going to kind of now do something. And what they have determined is that all of that information and evidence is still going to remain internal. And they are under a standing order, even though they're under investigation now by the Department of Justice, Federal Department of Justice finally, to take and package that information and send it where? Where do you think it's going to go?
The Vatican.
It goes to Rome, which, by the way, and this is part of the problem, that's a sovereign state. That's been another issue with this. And you know who's in the middle of all this in every country is the ambassador from the Vatican, say, to the United States and other countries. We met with our ambassador, Callista Gingrich, when we were in Rome in February. That was a really interesting meeting. And
that's Newt Gingrich's wife.
That's correct. Very, very nice person. We said, look, in the United States, it has now been determined by investigations that at least 7,000 priests in the last several decades, 7,000 have sexually assaulted or molested children in the United States. They have been transferred secretly under a system of cover-up from parish to parish, from schools to schools. I mean, people understand child sex trafficking, and I don't know a clear way to say this. I mean, people understand how horrible that is and so forth. These shadowy figures and characters that are doing this around the world. This is child sex trafficking.
Yeah, what you're doing differently is the children stay where they are.
Precisely.
And the perpetrators are the ones who are moving around.
You're trafficking the offender.
Extraordinary.
Inside of a system that not only tolerates this, but is structured in some essential way to permit, allow, and facilitate this. because of their beliefs and about the priesthood and about ordination and about power and authority within this structure. It is an absolutely astonishing thing. You know those Gestalt, that famous Gestalt figure of the woman, you're right, and she's got a feather, and then you see a young woman, and then you see an old woman. This issue is a lot like that. When you really dig into this and you really take this information, you'll momentarily see, sort of coming out of the thing that you always see, what's underneath there, this other figure that's there. And that's what this is. It's kind of like the obscene underside of this institution. All institutions have this obscene underside, but here we see it documented and detailed in a systematic and really astonishing fashion.
All right, so two quick questions. One is you referenced the structure, but why hasn't more been done to address this in terms of within the church? What is going on in the church where this is more than just overlooking what's happening? I mean, this
Correct.
clearly is a conscious effort to allow this to continue. Why is that?
Well, I mean, that's the big question. How conscious they are of it sometimes. I know there's decisions being made, but I also believe in the unconscious, and we're talking almost about the unconscious of this system. But to your question, I think, and I'm a therapist as well. I'm a psychotherapist. I've worked with survivors. People go into therapy because something in life is forcing them to change. Either something inside them or something outside of them. And they want things to be different, but they don't want to change. And I think what has been generated over the years is a desire for something different within the Catholic hierarchy, but they don't want to change. Because the change that this would bring about would change what ordination is, something essential to their faith and to their belief. And when it comes to a decision between what's more important, this structure, which brings, in their opinion, which they believe, salvation to humanity, to the globe, okay, versus, what this priest may have done or why he may have done it and so forth, they have always, in my experience, sided with the offender because it's the church that needs to survive because of the faithful. Any of this information that comes out, nothing changes till this becomes public. I've never seen anything change until it crosses that line. And they have this idea theologically and within their law about scandal, causing scandal. It's a little different than how we understand it, but their thing is if people realize that priests have done these things and are capable of doing these things, they're going to lose their faith in the priesthood. And if they lose their faith in the priesthood, they're going to lose their salvation in the next life. Now, maybe part of it is because they believe in another world. They believe in another life. So that, in a way, things that happen here are relative. They're not so bad. I mean, within Christianity, in a way, this is a miserable world, okay, I guess, and your job is to get to the next one. If you can't get to the next one without the sacraments, which only the priest can perform and give to you, well, then you've lost eternal life.
All right, well, I'm going to disagree with that analysis.
Sure.
Because, I mean, one question is, what percentage of priests, what's the estimate of the percentage of priests who participate in this awful behavior?
When you're in the United States, especially where there's been full investigations, right now, which is incredibly important and has taken a long time to get to, is that there's 20 states now actively investigating this. So that's 20 attorney generals, which is fantastic that that's finally happening. But where you've had grand juries are the fullest investigations we've had, and we've had several of those. Where documents have had to be forced court-ordered released, we've had those. And the upward, the percentage is probably from 7 to 10%.
Okay, so let's say it's 10%.
Okay.
So if I'm the church, I would think that the rational decision is to say, because this is happening, this not only undermines the priesthood, but it's undermining the entire Catholic Church.
Right.
And in terms of having, priests for the sacraments or essentially to manage and oversee the church and believers, to get rid of 10%, while an extraordinary number of people, no question, and certainly causing all kinds of potential dislocation, you still have 90%, and you have your future. So it doesn't seem rational to me to protect that, even if it's as high as 10%. It doesn't seem rational to me, because what you're saying is, I accept the fact by allowing this to continue and knowing more and more scandals are going to come out, as they have been, that I am destroying the foundation of the church, because what I'm destroying is people's belief in the church.
Well, there's two ways I try to respond to that. One, we'd have to talk about what rationality is. And this is about religion. And it's about the priesthood. When a man is ordained a priest, he has been chosen from eternity to be a priest. It's a kind of a circular argument. When a bishop lays hands on a priest or ordains a priest, he's meant to be a priest. No matter sort of what he's done, it's very difficult to eject him after ordination, because it's not just about a particular priest or about 10% of priests. It's about the priesthood, and that's a completely different matter. And I think, you know, a lot of them have maybe wanted to get rid of these guys, but what I'm talking about prohibits and prevents them from easily doing that. Because once that act of ordination has taken place, which is the center of their belief in faith, okay, so I know it sounds a bit confusing maybe, and it sounds illogical, but there is a kind of a logic there. It's wrong, it's disastrous, and it's dangerous, but you also have to understand this has been going on a long time.
But even if you yield and say they can still be priests, but they're not going to have a parish. They're not going to, I mean, we are central. I mean, it's like in some school systems, there are teachers who are horrendously bad, right, and they're not fired, but they're essentially shunted aside. You could do the same thing and not have the problem that you're talking about.
Well, that's what they've tried to do in the United States, and they've done it to some extent, but Rome and the Vatican has only allowed it under their law in the United States and just the United States. And I think that's a step towards a solution. But here's the problem. What you're talking about is an occupation, like a teacher. So in civil society, when you've assaulted a child, okay, you should be more than just shunted aside. Your license is taken from you, right? It's taken. And there's public notification as to why that license has been taken. That's not what happens with the priesthood. I think if it would be configured that way, that would be great. That would make a total sense. Because when you don't do that, what you're going to do, especially when you're moving them around, what you're going to do is that you're going to say that this entire occupation is somehow tainted by this. And it is by this if you won't eject those members. And so if they would see themselves that way and regulate themselves that way, I think that would be fantastic. But there's a lot within this very elaborate system of laws and practices and theology. You know, this didn't get sort of like invented last week, okay? I mean, the first mention of this in church documents about this problem is in the 2nd century. It has reemerged through the centuries. And this idea of putting a limit on what ordination means, that there is a limit to it, what that means. That's kind of what this would do by saying what I'd say, you know, if you've assaulted a child, because look, zero tolerance, which by the way, a word the Pope has stopped using, it's very interesting when he uses it and stops using it, means I think what most people would think it should mean. If you've raped or sexually assaulted a child, you are removed from the priesthood.
Right.
Right? Imagine.
And I'm not saying, by the way, I know we have to take a break and we'll come back to this. I'm not saying that that's all you do. I'm just talking about within the church. But when we come back, I want to talk about the legal system, because obviously those people need to be pursued as well. And the church can't protect them from that, although they try. So let's talk about that. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with Peter in just a moment.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbertv.com.
The Rexall Broadcaster of the Year Award recognizes an individual who, through leadership, skill, and dedication, is advancing the broadcast industry in our state and our nation. Tonight, we honor Aaron Harber. Aaron has worked extensively in the media as a host, producer, political and economic commentator, and columnist. Today, the Aaron Harber Show is the focus of his media involvement. Aaron, it is a privilege to present you with the Rex Howe Broadcaster of the Year Award. Congratulations.
Just make journalism great again. I'm Aaron Harber, host of the Aaron Harber Show. Find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scene photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbortv.com.
Welcome back to the show. I'm with Peter Isely. So, Peter, what I'm saying is there are kind of two systems that exist. There's the church and its rules, as you've articulated. There's also the legal system here. And it strikes me that both have, to put it mildly, underperformed. I mean, certainly the church has not only addressed this problem, has failed to address this problem in a serious manner, or as serious a manner as it should. And in fact, one of the things I want to talk more about is how the church has covered up and has continued, has perpetrated or perpetuated this problem. I'd like to talk a little bit more about that. But what is astounding to me is that the legal system in this country, in terms of law enforcement, in terms of district attorneys, et cetera, have really failed the kids and families of America for decades to the tune of tens of thousands of cases. Why is that? And what, I mean, you mentioned the attorney generals, but why is that? Why did such an enormous volume of criminal activity that everyone agrees is despicable be allowed to continue and still is allowed to continue?
Yeah, you're bringing up such an essential point. I mean, first of all, we are talking about two, quote, legal systems. In the church, it's called canon law. In some countries, like where I was just in Argentina, the Pope's country, canon law is like recognized as law there. They have a concordat, they have an agreement with the Vatican recognizing this law, and it's being actively used to prevent prosecution and arrest of priests. But we have canon law, and then we have civil and criminal law around the world. And it's really with these issues of sexual assault and abuse by clerics, there's a dual justice system around the world. And so the question in part is why was it constantly permitted and allowed to be put into the church's quote, justice system and not within the laws of the state or the criminal and civil laws? And I know, as you know, when I came forward first with other survivors around the United States 25 years ago when this started coming out, you know, my hope, I think our hope was that, you know, if we could tell our story, if we could get this truth out and get it to the people who we thought didn't know about it because we couldn't talk about it. So that means the courts and the justice system. And that if we could do that, then they were going to do their job because they had no idea. And what you see in these files, there's now over 1 million pages around the United States, and I can talk where I come from in Milwaukee, is that the district attorney and the judges and the police had a great deal of knowledge about this, and that they're the ones that allowed and permitted the church to take care of it themselves. There are, in many of these cases, there were the intersection with law enforcement and with justice officials many, many times. So the question is, why did they do that? This failure to put this criminal activity and to place it within our laws, okay, is the context in which we can't understand what the church has done till we understand that massive failure that you talked about. I mean, part of it was, you know, depending on the community or the city, the power and prestige that the Catholic hierarchy has within, you know, the bishop and the archbishop has within a community. I mean, one thing that's coming out of this with lawsuits and stuff is, and this is not at the parish level, but the astonishing amount of wealth, the inconceivable amount of wealth that the Catholic Church or a diocese has. The property that they own, the things that they have is absolutely stunning. And part of it is their political connections and their political affiliations and in the business community. There's an important person from the Catholic Church, I'm telling you, in my city, in every boardroom, in every newsroom, in every police station. I mean, they're there. Just to give an example, we had in Milwaukee the longest running DA in the United States, 30 some years. He didn't run for re-election in 2006 again because this was going to come out. And now they always said with the DA, he's looked at everything, he was always clearing them, to find in the files that one of the worst notorious offenders, who I've talked to, by the way, Franklin Becker, that when he was actively assaulting and raping children, he knew about it. And there's a note.
The DA knew about it.
Yes, the district attorney. And I knew that he knew about it. I just knew for years that he knew about it. We used to call him Archbishop McCann. Okay.
The DA.
Yes, and then we'd call the Archbishop Weakland, who, by the way, was the most liberal and intelligent Archbishop probably in the United States. We would call him District Attorney Weakland. And in the file about Becker, it's unbelievable. They call him, and they made sure too, because these were, I think they were still using those IBM Selectric typewriters. These were in the 90s with the thing, and it was like
I still have one.
Yeah, right, okay, where you could change, put that another font in. We thought that was amazing. But because what they have, the amount of, like in Milwaukee, there's 60,000 pages of these files, 60,000. And so you take someone like Becker, who assaulted dozens and dozens of children, was transferred to California, assaulted kids, they brought him back to Milwaukee and so on. And this is the vicar log, the priest personnel guy. He's got to go in and constantly make new notations because they've got stuff coming in every, the amount of effort and attention that they had to pay to this. And so one of them's like District Attorney Michael McCann. It's like boom, boom, boom to make sure that's underlined. And he's like, I called Mike about, this is the vicar, I called Mike about Frank, and he what's going on right now. And it's like, Mike told me, you've given him enough warnings. Now, this man had years already of abuse. Take him out of ministry, and if you don't get any reports on him in a couple years, put him back in. That's coming from the chief law enforcement officer in my community, telling them, instructing them, put him back in. And to tell you how authentic this notation is, there's another paragraph. And then he says, and then Mike brought up to me that that Father whatever at St. John de Nepomuc, that's over on the west side, that on Wednesdays and Saturdays, after the AA meeting they have there, he's opening up the basement of the rectory and he has slot machines down there. Okay. And he goes, that he wanted to know everything about. This could look bad if this comes out. I want to know who's involved. I want the names of the individuals involved. Astonishing, right?
Just incredible. All right, we're going to take our last break. We'll wrap up part one of our two-part series with Pete in just a moment.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email harbertv.com.
Safely stop fires around your home. Introducing the Fire Ice XT 20-ounce aerosol canister. Fire Ice XT is an eco-friendly water-based fire suppressant gel. Unlike a traditional fire extinguisher, Fire Ice XT is a highly effective, non-toxic firefighting agent that is easy and safe to use around your home, family, and pets. Available at Amazon.com or call 800-924-4874.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. Find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scene photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today. I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. I very much would like to hear from you about the program, so please send me an email with your thoughts. You can suggest what topics I should cover, what guests I should invite to be on the show, or even what specific questions you would like me to ask. This is your program, so send your suggestions to aaron@harbertv.com. I promise to personally read every one, so email me today. And most of all, thanks for watching.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbortv.com.
Welcome back to the show. This is part one of our special two-part series with Peter Isely. So one of the things that really intrigues me, of course, is just not just the power of the church, but the fact that in certain communities, so many people are Catholic, that you have a huge Catholic contingent, politically Catholics. I mean, I grew up in a city in Chicago, where the Catholic Church was everywhere and omnipresent, and also just politically very, very powerful as well, which at the time I thought was fine. That didn't occur to me that this was going on and these kinds of cover-ups were occurring. What can we do to change that?
Well, the Cardinal of Chicago, Cardinal Supich, who I met again in Baltimore, we were at the Vatican meeting with him because he was like pegged by Francis, to lead this, plan this summit and everything. So we're sitting there with the four big leaders of this summit because Francis wasn't there. We were like, where is he? He's supposed to be at this meeting.
You expected him to be there.
Of course, this global summit. Bring this, I'm listening to survivors. I've never been loved so much than before that summit as a survivor. We love survivors. We want to listen to survivors. But I was sitting with Supich, and he's a nice man. He's kind of like a pharmaceutical CEO. And, he's going on about whatever, and I said to him, excuse me, Cardinal, but I don't trust you. Right now, I mean, he's going to lead this thing. And I'm like, right now, the Attorney General of Illinois just issued a preliminary report about your files that she has taken. And you guys withheld 500 names of credibly accused child molesters. And for years, Cardinal Supich has been saying, we're transparent, I've given all the names. 500 names. And it's like, I'll trust you, and this is what people need to do. I'll trust you when the Attorney General of Illinois says you can trust Cardinal Supich. And that's the kind of conversations that they need to hear and need to be in. He had absolutely no answer for that.
What did he say?
Nothing.
Nothing at all.
He bowed his head, he took notes. I mean, it's so, who else could get away with this? I swear to God. 500 names of priests that assault, and it's worse is that he was saying for years, I've given the names. He put out a list of names, okay?
Of priests?
Yes. So it's like, what's the bigger lie? Just lying to me or telling me, okay, here's the truth, and you're withholding 2/3 of those names?
So what, he published a list of a couple hundred names?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in Chicago, I think it was 100 and something. But I mean, the actual number, and this is what we're finding because they're starting to dump these lists now. We've been pushing this for years, and finally, because of these investigations, they're trying to make an advanced move and drop these lists. But you'll see time after time, once the Attorney General gets the list, it is a huge number of them are not, reported by here's our transparent, official list. And that's the problem. How many times do you have to be caught at lying? Cardinal Wuerl, for instance, of Washington, okay? He's the one with McCarrick, if you know the story of Cardinal McCarrick, and he's out there before the Pennsylvania grand jury report, because that's where he comes from, saying, I didn't ever transfer one of these priests. He said, that was not my process, on national TV. And so what comes out in the grand jury report? He knew it was in there. He did, like the worst one. And then he keeps saying it. And then he's caught again twice at it.
All right. Well, when we go to part two, I want to talk more about what we can also do to help victims. So this is the end of part one with Peter Isely. Make sure you watch part two. I'm Aaron Harber. Thanks for watching.
Please contact us. We want to hear from you. And thanks for watching.